Balance. The essential aspect to a healthy lifestyle and the true display of strength and control. And there are no greater things in Honkai Star Rail in terms of strength than Aeons, the higher dimensional beings that obsess over concepts while making the energy that makes up the fabric of the universe their tool. Some view them as gods, others view them as a thing that just simply exists, and some view them as an enemy that must be eliminated. But where did these Aeons come from, and what exactly do they do? Well, I am so glad you asked. Because in the previous two videos I covered the Elation, the Trailblaze, the Order, and the Remembrance. But in this video I will be going over the two strongest, most mysterious, and least known about Aeons in the entire Honkai Star Rail universe. The Equilibrium and the Nihility. Yes, none other than the Aeon with Emanators so strong that they themselves are viewed as gods, and the Aeon that is literally the all-encompassing void. You guys have been telling me that you've been looking forward to these two, so without further ado, this is Honkai Star Rail Aeon Ascensions Explained. Okay, so the way we're gonna do this is the same as always. We go in alphabetical order and talk about the following things: how the Aeon ascended, what they do, how they interact with other Aeons, and what this means on a universal scale. And yes, I am well aware that Indrilla should be before IX, but IX is technically a number at the same time, so I'm gonna put them at the beginning of I. Good? Good. Alright, so allow me to introduce our first subject. You see, there are three paths that are widely claimed to be the strongest by the community: the Nihility, the Finality, and the Equilibrium. And many believe that the Equilibrium stands above all to keep the universe in a state of balance. But what is this balance? Well, the Aeon that presides over the path of Equilibrium's name is HooH, or HooH. And I'm gonna go with HooH because that sounds more symmetrical and it's a Pokemon. But there is so much more to this Aeon than the two different ways to pronounce its name, which you're going to find out is very ironic. Because duality is a major theme with HooH. Let me explain. Because just like Enna the Order, HooH is incredibly old and rivals Enna, Qlipoth, and Long for being the oldest. And though we have no clue on how HooH ascended, we can make some inferences based off of the time frame they share with Enna the Order. Because every Aeon ascends in response to something, with that path being the response itself. And I say this because Nanook rose because of Rupert 1 and the Swarm disaster causing them to hate the universe, Tazeronth ascended and replicated out of loneliness, and Noose ascended out of a thirst for knowledge. So why would an Aeon ascend to bring balance to the universe? Well, probably because of the Dusk Wars that also prompted Enna's ascension, because Enna and HooH are very similar in nature with key differences. Both strive for control, but HooH has a more human-friendly approach to it. You see, Enna the Order is centered around justice and righteousness, but the worlds they ruled over didn't last long before they collapsed. And I believe this is all due to the same reason that Sunday failed in his plan to execute the Eternal Dream. Because of this little thing called freedom. And it does not matter how comfy or perfect a world is, if you have to sacrifice your freedom for it, odds are human nature will clash against it until it breaks. But this is where HooH comes in with a different approach to the same goal. Because HooH is notoriously subtle to the point of where even their Emanators share their surreptitious way of influencing the universe. And they view everything that exists in one of two ways. Lygus gave us a great example of this with Castoris, whose authority of life and death represents the Equilibrium. Because she brought back the balance of life and death, stopping spirits from endlessly wandering. Put simply, HooH only sees things as life and death with nothing between it, and that is the way they balance the universe. Equal life, equal death. Also, them being twins and HooH split themselves in half but then merged together again and acts in secrecy, while Castoris' Prima Mobile being peace. Lygus was really slick with this one, I'll give him that. And apparently the system in which they allocate these two categories is near flawless, because no mortal has ever found a breach. But just because they find this balance once just means that they must maintain said balance. And this is where we gotta talk about the way HooH works. Because this Aeon understands that humans must be given the illusion of free will, so they act in the shadows and never directly. And here is where we gotta talk about the very scary Scalpel Woman in a candy candy-colored dress, Pokakakamon! Because one of the only times we know HooH intervened was in the assassination of the Emperor of Robo-Racism. Because for some reason we know that they ever so slightly altered the angle that Polka's scalpel drove through Rupert's chest. Now, we don't know if this was essential or not, but their intervention here is worthy of note because it's consistent with all of the others. But I think you would understand how these events would upset universal balance. Tazzy and Rupert had to go. Both of them. And judging by how they seem to have no issue working in tandem with other Aeons, HooH doesn't seem to be problematic. In fact, it is insinuated that HooH and Anna shared the same burden of bringing justice to the universe. And now that Anna is gone, HooH's job is harder. So all evidence suggests that other Aeons are on good terms with HooH. And then there's Noose. Because if you remember the solitary waves theory, it is the paths pulling against each other that keep Noose from being able to calculate the future and achieving their ultimate goal. And this can be easily seen as HooH keeping the balance, leading to the universe's fate constantly swaying from knowable to unknowable. So if there is an Aeon that has a problem with HooH, it's probably Noose, but Noose doesn't have emotions or opinions, so it doesn't matter much. Now, I could spiral into a deep dive into the Equilibrium's Emanators, the Arbitrators, but that's more faction than Aeon, and so that's a discussion for a different day. Put simply, they are small-scale HooHs that try to force everything into a zero-sum game to achieve a balance according to HooH's commands. But like I mentioned earlier, if you split things into two sides, between those two sides is nothingness, and therein lies nihility. And this is my explanation for why Acheron shows up in Amphorius, because for this brief moment our Trailblazer was between life and death, and thereby in the still waters of oblivion, which is Acheron's domain. It's nothingness. Between life and death is nothingness. And this brings us to IX. Yes, it's about time we talked about the Void. And understandably so, we have no idea where IX came from, or where they ascended, or when they ascended. But there is something interesting in their description. They are the Aeon of Apathy that pays no attention to the universe because they believe the fate of the multiverse is nothingness. Did you catch that? I hope you did, because this Aeon is different from all of the others. Because this Aeon has an opinion about the fate of the multiverse, not the universe. Nanook wants to destroy the universe, HooH wants to bring balance to the universe, Noose wants to solve universal mysteries, but IX knows the multiverse is going to fall into nothingness. See why I call this an all-encompassing void? I meant all, which suggests that IX has some knowledge of the imaginary tree and the fate of the imaginary tree, which is crazy, but would also align with Aha's fable because they looked into the void from atop the imaginary tree. But where Aha laughed in defiance, IX chose apathy. And as a depressed Aeon, their apathy is contagious. And like a dark cloud of depression, this infectious apathy spreads to infect people that then become IX's Emanators. Because IX couldn't care less about creating Emanators or monitoring how much power they give them access to, their shadow does that for them. A shadow that can take on a multitude of different forms, including a black hole. And I don't know what's worse, being sucked into a black hole that deletes you and every memory of you with it, or becoming a self-annihilator, a being who steps into the shadow of IX and loses all sense of meaning for their entire existence. Forced to wander the universe with no goals, no direction, no purpose, and eventually perishing in a meaningless way as their cognition and body and memories all fade away and they become nothingness. But for some, this curse does at the very least give them purpose, because some self-annihilators dedicate their life purpose to destroying IX, which results in IX having Emanators that want to kill them. Something IX once again could care less about. Which brings me to Acheron and Zephyro, because this has some insane implications for Zephyro. Because Zephyro is rumored to be a self-annihilator, meaning that he is a Nihility Emanator with unrestricted access to IX's power. But Nova, Zephyro is a Lord Ravager, a Destruction Emanator. Yeah, I know. This is where the terrifying implications come in, because this means that Zephyro is a double emanator, a canon double emanator. And this makes perfect sense because if an Aeon would share their emanator with any other Aeon, it would be IX, because odds are IX doesn't even know they have emanators, and Nanook is a known path poacher. His latest Lord Ravager is Selenova, and she is a former Harmony emanator, meaning that she is part Aeon, because Sheepe is weird like that. And we just recently got the news that Iron Tomb is a severed off part of Noose, so technically Iron Tomb is the same type of part emanator, part Aeon as Selenova. So we know Nanook can and will fuse his power with other Aeons, and IX doesn't care. Or do they? Because Dr. Primitive of all people casts doubt on IX's presumed unresponsiveness to the universe, and hints at the prospect of IX creating Self-Anihilators as a way to intentionally spread their shadow across the cosmos. Food for thought. And that is just about everything we know about the Aeon of Nothingness. We don't know much, but there are a lot of really ominous implications that hide just beneath the surface of this blob. And perhaps this whole section has no meaning. And perhaps this video has no meaning. Why are you even watching? Is what I would say if I was NIHILITY. But the elation side of me chooses to laugh in the face of such pointless depression, and the erudition side continues to search for answers. Why? Because this is Honkai Star Rail Aeon Ascensions Explained. Didn't think we'd end up talking about double emanators, did ya? I definitely will have to look into this in the future, because low-key, I thought this up on the fly while reading this script, and I had to stop reading in order to type this in and get my thoughts down. But next up, we have Indrilla the Beauty and Lon the Hunt, and judging by the loud minority of Argenti fans out there, I've seen in the comments, rest assured, your time is soon. Because I think I've finally got a bead on what this path truly stands for, and trust me, it's way more deep than outward attractiveness. And coupled with the Shanjo's Aeon of Friendly Fire, this is going to be an interesting next episode that you don't want to miss. And just in case you want a teaser or want to talk about it with other lore enthusiasts, I have a Discord over 1,000 members strong, and we'd love to have you join our chaotic family of overthinkers. The Amphorius update is right around the corner, but that does not mean that this series is going anywhere, because we finish what we start around here, and we don't do things the easy way on this channel. And by we, I mean I. What do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.